What's going on, everyone? Today we have a fun video. We get to rank all 5 of the Star Wars Unlimited sets on a list from 1 to 5. We finally actually have enough sets to even consider doing a video like this. I can't wait till we have 30 or 40 on this list. But there's a lot of considerations when we're ranking sets in of themselves, right? I mean, you have like overall card pool, you've got new mechanics, you've got power level of the set, the impact of the meta, the people's enjoyability, what the thematic of the set was, on and on and on. And all of these things are going to be considerations today. Now, I'm going to generally steer away my personal enjoyment. I'm sure I'll do a full video on that in the future where I just like my personal fun level of each of these sets. Instead, we're going to be looking at more I don't want to say objective factors, because some of this is going to be subjective, but things like, okay, how common are their cards in the meta? What was the impact during this time of the set, and is it still impactful today? Are the certain cards, did the community actually enjoy the set? What was the impact of the overall engagement with the set? Were there a lot of product purchase, or were there a lot of people looking for this content? That type of stuff, which is more measurable versus the draft format or the limited format, and then the actual cards are just really fun to play with, right? So I'm gonna try to steer that way. It's more for just fun, and I'm really curious to hear your lists down below. And we've talked a little bit about this with my patrons, so big thank you to you all, and thank you to everyone who's been supporting the channel, but especially a big thank you to my patrons. Let me know what your lists are. I am very curious to hear what your favorites are. I think the last time that I even considered reaching out to the community to see what your opinion was around the Twilight of the Republic era, when this set released. You're kind of comparing these three, so we haven't even included Jump to Lightspeed or Legend of the Force in terms of what the community actually enjoys, besides just my analytics that I've seen. So I'll just use that as a baseline, and we'll see what we can do for the video, guys. Bringing us back to over a year ago, the very first set in Star Wars Unlimited, Spark of Rebellion, starts us off. Oh my gosh, this feels like a little bit nostalgic. When you get to like Twilight of the Republic, Shadows of the Galaxy, and Spark of Rebellion, especially Shadows of the Galaxy and Spark of Rebellion, we're talking over a year ago, and most people these days haven't even played during these 3 sets. A lot of them have started playing during Jump to Lightspeed and Legends of the Force, which is just crazy to think about. If that's one of you, let me know in the comment section down below. But I think this is going to start at a very high point. I think most people, including myself, would put Spark of Rebellion in the #1 spot, which is crazy to think about as well. We started at the biggest high point for Star Wars Unlimited. Now, I do think that there are a couple of sets that people have really argued that it is better, or that they feel are better, but Spark of Rebellion is a great baseline. And I think that's one of the interesting things. As I said, there's going to be a lot of pros and cons with a lot of these sets. I think the biggest con with Spark of Rebellion is that it didn't really introduce anything new. It was a safe set. That said, because it was a safe set, and because it was introducing Star Wars Limited in of itself, it was basically all new. So that con is kind of not there. This set actually doesn't have a whole lot of cons with it. The power level was extremely strong, not just in the legendaries. You're thinking like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, which are absolute staples to this day, but also even in the commons and uncommon territory. I mean, think of, you have Power of the Darksaber, which is a staple common that's played across so many decks. Force Throw, which is talked about potentially being banned at the current moment, right? Cards that are absolutely incredible across the board. On a more limited note, the limited format and the synergy of the set was absolutely amazing. One of the best things that Spark of Rebellion did was that it introduced so many cards that were actually viable and reasonable to be playing, that a lot of the sets saw play, and it started at such a high power point that each of the future sets could really build off of it. Yes, you would still start with a base of, here's my Spark of Rebellion deck, and then you would slowly start to slot in more and more cards as you went along. Shadows of the Galaxy came out. Oh, I'm going to take a couple cards here and put in my Sabine deck. Twilight of the Republic came out. No, we'll get to that in just a moment. Jump to Lightspeed came out. Ooh, some space cards came out. These are pretty good. Legend of the Force came out. Well, as I said, more cards slotted in or more cards from Spark Rebellion slotted into Legends of the Force. This set provided such an amazing baseline for the game. And to this day, it is still one of the most powerful sets in the game. You still have the face cards: Aggression, Vigilance, Cunning, Command. You've got band leaders like Boba Fett from Spark of Rebellion. You have leaders that are still from Spark of Rebellion at the top echelons of play. Sabine, as an example. This set was absolutely fantastic. The meta from that time, super amazing trifecta of aggro, mid-range, and control. You had Sabine Green, which was a lot different than it is today. The curve often topped out at 5 resources with a Steadfast Battalion with ECL, so you could give +2/+2 to Steadfast Battalion. That used to be the best ECL target, by the way, Steadfast Battalion. Crazy to think about. I wish we could go back to those days sometimes. We had things like the Guerrilla Attack Pod as potentially the highest thing on your curve, but you would be using a Rebel Shell with Sabine, with General Dodonna in a lot of cases. You had Boba Green, which is, well, banned now, but a much more mid-range focus, resupply Super Laser Technician. Think about that. I mean, all the ramp cards basically came from set 1 as well. Super Laser and resupply was core to that. You had ECL as well with Boba Fett. You still had the Steadfast Battalion, but you had this amazing leader to reset your resources to do some crazy things. Then you had Iden Green, or in some cases Krennic Green, or in other cases even Vader Blue, all kind of in that same more controlling shell, which did absolutely amazing work, mainly because some of the most powerful removal options, Super Laser Blast, Takedown, Power of the Dark Side, existed in set 1. I mean, a lot of these archetypes nowadays just wouldn't exist without Spark of Rebellion, so I think it'd be hard to really put it lower than 2. I think it is in the first or second best set of the game. I think anyone that's putting it lower than the first or second best set of the game, I'd have to really see what their argument would be. For me, it is number 1. It is number 1. If I were to consider my own personal enjoyment of the set, this was my favorite set to play limited in, and it was one of my favorite metas, to be honest. The game was a much more simple game. There are a lot less, frustrating things that existed in the game, and really that started to come into play as you added more sets on, just because the set was so simple at the time. The only thing that it had against it really was the Boba Fett leader. I do think that was a little bit of a design issue. So that is definitely going into the cons bucket. Boba Fett being a 4/7 leader on deploy for 5 resources is absolutely insane. So that goes in the con bucket of, well, this was a safe set, didn't introduce anything crazy, but overall it really just gave a lot of people a great first impression of Star Wars Unlimited, and I think it goes into the number 1 spot. Next up, we've got Shadows of the Galaxy. This one is an interesting one. If you look at a lot of my videos, one of the things with Spark Rebellion is that it was so amazing that people bought so much product that Shadows of the Galaxy was not ready for it. It was sold out. Basically, people just couldn't get it. People just could not get Shadows of the Galaxy product. They wanted it, they could not get it. It was massively ordered, and it really soured a lot of people's opinions. The community opinion of Shadows of the Galaxy at the time was really bad. The real big jump that Star Wars Unlimited had due to Spark Rebellion basically got completely wiped out because of Shadows of the Galaxy. You could see the trends of the popularity of the game just go straight up and then straight down after Shadows of the Galaxy release. But now that we've had some time to look back, where is it right now? Is it, down here where a lot of people would say? I actually don't think so. And this is a tough one. I actually am going to put it at number 3. I'm actually going to put it at number 3. And I think this is going to be a tough one. This is probably the most controversial of them all. But if you think about what's actually being played and some of the cards that got, banned, this definitely introduced a level of power that I think is higher than some of the other sets until we reach one in particular, and still to this day is played a lot. But I actually think some of the mechanics of this set are some of the most fun mechanics of the game. When Shadows of the Galaxy came out, introduced Smuggle and Bounty. Now, Bounty is just rewarding you for interacting with your opponent's units and killing things. You use your units to kill their units, or use removal effects. It's kind of a fun little 1-2 punch. I put a bounty on a unit, I kill it, I get something in reward. That was kind of like a fun little claiming. Honestly, a little bit trivial. The real mechanic that I like is Smuggle. Smuggle is an absolute staple. If you think about some of the cards and some of the combos that have come out, take for example the new Vader Timely Intervention. Timely Intervention is from Shadows of the Galaxy. It's an incredible card. It's also even more incredible because of the fact that you play it from your resources and essentially draw an additional card. The Smuggle mechanic, from that to Cassian, to Lom Pike, to Hotshot Blaster, it's got some of those powerful cards in the game right now. I mean, these cards are staples because of the versatility of them. But not only that, but Shadows of the Galaxy also introduced some of the most powerful legendaries and rares that we still see to this day. Take, for example, Crate Dragon, which is played in like a 3 of copies across like all Han Blue decks, which is one of the cards that gives you game against some of these longer decks, longer game plans against some of these controlling decks. It is an incredible card, but you also have things like Poe Dameron and Wrecker, which are staples to the aggro Sabine deck, and absolutely shifted Sabine from like, okay, this is a great deck in set 1 to this is a deck to beat in set 2. It definitely got a major improvement. Now, set 2 also introduced a lot of options for Boba Fett at the time. Forlom and Zuckuss were 2 great new additions to the deck, and those are the 2 that I remember the most. This was definitely the time. This is when the competitive event started to happen, and we saw our very first planetary qualifiers. If you look back at the set 2 meta, it was definitely dominant, and this is due to Boba Fett. If you look, this was by far the most dominant meta, besides one other one, which we'll get to in just a moment, and that was handled very quickly. But they didn't want to ban anything early on because of the fact that it was super early on, and we hadn't seen any competitive events before. But this was like a 40% Boba Fett meta. And it wasn't just Boba Fett, it was Boba Fett yellow, green, blue, and red that was all over the place. So the competitive meta definitely lacked in this area, but the power level of cards have stayed the test of time. The thematics of the set, not as exciting as Spark of Rebellion, where you had the original trilogy. You had some bounty hunters, people didn't like it as much, but one thing that's remained true is the mechanics and the power level of the set are definitely up there as some of the most powerful cards and some of the most powerful mechanics. Again, it just goes to show you, like, Time Intervention, Crate Dragon are options. Cassian's up there. You also had Fell the Dragon as another card that was introduced in Shadows of the Galaxy. Poe Dameron. You just had some amazing additional options. Hotshot Blaster. It was definitely a solid set, and still to this day is played, at least the cards in it are played a lot of the time. So I think number 3, at least as of right now, is a safe spot for it. I do think the meta for Shadows of the Galaxy is amongst the worst. Like, at the time of playing it, when you're playing draft and you're playing some other, well, not actually draft, I think it actually had a great draft format. When you were playing competitive options or Premier in general, you were just fighting against Boba Fett all the time. It was not fun. Sabine and Boba just completely ran through most of the decks. Bossk Blue was introduced. That had some game plan up against Boba, but basically it pushed out every other options available to you because of how dominant Boba Fett was. And that was really unfortunate. Draft was actually pretty fun. Rey was the dominant leader back then in draft. The ability to put experience tokens on your units was just absolutely fantastic. And it was actually probably my second favorite draft format, which might be surprising to a lot of you. I actually find Spark Rebellion to be my favorite draft format, and Shadows of the Galaxy to be my second favorite draft format. One of the things that I absolutely love doing is getting those bounty cards and really battling it out to claim the bounty. That was one of the kind of side mechanics. Bounty did a lot more work in draft, and it felt like you had to struggle for it a lot more, and that just made the whole rewarding feeling all that much better. And it wasn't like a game over situation. People would put up sentinels, try to block it off, block your collection of the bounty. It even had more removal, introduced Rivals Fall and Fell the Dragon, so you actually had interaction to deal with heavily powered up leaders and big units, which was kind of fun. So I actually really enjoyed it, and overall, as of right now, it's number 3 on the list for me. On to the next one in Twilight of the Republic. Now, as I mentioned, with the gradual uptick with Spark Rebellion and the harsh downturn with Shadows of the Galaxy, it definitely continued into Twilight of the Republic. And to be honest, this set, was a little bit mediocre. The theme of it was absolutely amazing. I love the Clone Wars. It is one of my favorite eras of Star Wars. It is definitely my favorite. I don't want to say canon era because it goes back a lot, and Revan is technically canon, but the KOTOR era is not. That's my favorite. But at least Twilight of the Republic did have one of my favorite eras of Star Wars, and the theme was amazing. I was really excited about it. The mechanics introduced Coordinate and Exploit, which the fact that a lot of you are probably like, oh yeah, that's Exploit. I forgot that was a mechanic right now. That's going to give you a hint as to where it's going to go. It is probably the worst set of the group. Now, it's kind of harsh to put it in the worst set, because honestly, I don't think it was like a horrible set or anything, but it's not just that the mechanics really fell short, and that the mechanics were honestly not as interesting as I was hoping for. It introduced token units for the first time as well. We were kind of hoping that the token units alongside Coordinate, you could build big boards and do something fun with it. Unfortunately, the way Star Wars Unlimited works, it doesn't really support this massive amount of needing a ton of actions to close out the game. And that's what tokens do. Having a lot of units on the board make it so that you have to use a lot of your actions to interact with your opponent. And that's kind of stinks. Exploit, also, you put out a bunch of units and using them to basically put out big units, ended up being really bad. Like horrible. Like no one uses any exploit card in the entire game bad. Like I don't even know if anyone that's playing any exploit options really, even in my like casual store showdowns, like no one just enjoys these cards at all. The biggest thing with Twilight Republic with exploit was that a lot of the exploit payoffs were overcost. So like let's say you had a 6 resource 6/7. Take for example ATRT from Spark of Rebellion. That was just a 6 resource 6/7. That's what it was. Ground unit, right? In Spark of Rebellion, that would have been an 8 resource 6/7, but with exploit 2 or something like that. That's the kind of thing that happened. They basically just raised the cost, but then gave it exploit, which basically negated any bonus you possibly could have. Now, there were some exceptions to this, like Malevolence was kind of something that you could do for fun, but they basically made a lot of things over cost, and the exploit effectiveness did not really function at all. Coordinate, really, I mean, it does work, and there are a couple Coordinate cards. You see Plo Koon as probably the standout card of Twilight of the Republic. It is one of the better cards in the game, but that's really the only card that people are playing in their decks from Twilight of the Republic. You have Plo Koon and Sanctioner Shuttle. Those are the only two ones that I could really remember from this set that are actually played frequently in the meta. Now you also have like General's Blade a little bit here and there. So yes, there are like 2 to 3 cards from Twilight of the Republic, but that's it. 2 to 3 cards. Like that's really all we're talking about. It's nowhere near close to Twilight Shadows of the Republic or Shadows of the Galaxy or Spark of Rebellion. And we're talking to like far down the list. Like yes, Plo Koon is played in Cunning Heroism decks, but those decks in general aren't played as much as some of the other options that we have in the meta right now. So even in terms of power level of the set, it's not even close to the other options that we have in the meta currently. So the power level wasn't there. The mechanics kind of fell short. The sentiment of the community wasn't high on this set. It overall didn't do all that much. Now, one of the best things about it was that the Carbonite boosters were something that were announced during this time, and your product shortages really started to get corrected during this time. So this definitely marked the uptick of popularity of Star Wars Unlimited. So that was kind of a nice little finish. And I will say the meta during this time, compared to Shadows of the Galaxy, Boba Fett did get banned at this time. So we had a healthy meta. It was some really cool cards at the time. Twilight of the Republic did introduce a couple of new options. It did introduce a couple leaders. Jango Fett did have a banning, right? So we're going to talk about that in Jump to Lightspeed. But Jango Fett is banned to this day. We had Quinlan, who's still a very popular leader. There were a couple that were in there that are still good. So the power level of the set wasn't like atrociously bad, but it was definitely the weakest of the 5 sets on this list. And overall, I think a lot of people think of Twilight of the Republic and they joke about this set, unfortunately. But for me, it is going to be number 5 on the list. Jump to Lightspeed is next. And this is the one where I really feel that this is the controversial point, right? Because I feel bad putting it in number 4. I feel real bad at putting it number 4. I do, because I believe that this is an argument you could absolutely make. Like, Jump to Lightspeed number 3, it was a good set. I think what's interesting about it is, like, Twilight of the Republic, the set was okay. It wasn't like horrible and wasn't great. It was just reasonable. This wasn't even bad, but Jump to Lightspeed was actually a good set. It did have a couple of mechanics. It had piloting as one of the mechanics in the new set. Was that the only mechanic that it had? Well, I don't know why I'm blanking on if there was another mechanic, but piloting was the new mechanic of the set, and it had leaders as pilots, which was kind of the thing. Now, pilots in general ended up being pretty poor. You don't really see a whole lot of pilots in the game. Chewbacca is one of the few ones, and you don't really see a ton of leaders from Jump to Lightspeed. Vader is one of the ones that you see the most, but overall, Jump to Lightspeed, I mean, it was just kind of a fun set. It introduced a ton of space units, and it kind of shook up the game because a lot of the game was not enough space units to really make a space deck, and now space was something that you could play a lot of cards of and do well with. The leaders doing something different than just deploying and being pilots was actually a fun mechanic. The overall game plan of having leaders upgrades and having upgrade hate work against them was kind of interesting. It definitely was one of the worst draft formats, actually, looking back on it. One of the things that was really, really obnoxious was there's a lot of space units, and if you were able to get a piloted leader onto a space unit, there was not many ways to deal with that, and it ended games very, very quickly. The overall power level of the set was actually decent. At the time, it added a lot of cards to the format. You had like Red 5, which is still a very, very solid one to this day. No Glory Only Results, one of the best removal events in the game. Blue Leader is another one that ended up adding. Rebellious Hammerhead in those Han decks is another one. There were definitely quite a few options from Jump to Lightspeed that did some work. It's definitely fallen off as the new set has come out with Legends of the Force. But Jump to Lightspeed during this time was really, really good. Now, there were a couple cons with it. Because it was a full space set, it introduced a bunch of things that became very big problems. The two cards that I think about the most, Jango and Triple Dark Raid. So Jango, with the new set, you had new Devastator, new IG-2000, and new War Juggernaut. Before, in set 3, Jango was primarily a space deck. You still ran Triple Dark Raid, you had a couple of ground units, and that was pretty much it. Heavy Persuader Tank was one of the few exploit cards that actually saw play as like a 1 or 2 of in Jango at the time, which is kind of crazy to think about. But with Jump to Lightspeed, you had so many new space units, like I said, Devastator, IG-2000, and War Juggernaut to Jango, that Triple Dark Raid and Jango both became immense problems. And it wasn't just Jango, like Triple Dark Raid was a problem for other decks as well, but Jango definitely made it absolutely disgusting. The ability and the synergy between those two cards was so gross. You could Triple Dark Raid into War Juggernaut. Triple Dark Raid allowed you to play a War Juggernaut for 4 resources, which was incredible. You were able to exhaust something when it came down, and you were able to attack in for a ton of damage. If you had Jango out, you could exhaust their entire board and have a readied up War Juggernaut. It was so gross. That ability to prevent your opponent from making actions definitely was tough. Now, Jango technically came out from Twilight of the Republic, but the cards from Jump to Lightspeed made it a disgusting deck, and that's what was the big problem with that meta. It was by far the worst meta in the game. Yes, Boba Fett was obnoxious, but this was so bad, Jango only lasted for like 2 weeks before it got banned. At least with Boba Fett, it lasted a lot longer. But Jango's dominance was so gross. It was more than Boba Fett's dominance in terms of percentage of the meta at the time, and it immediately got banned. Alongside DJ at this time as well. The Tech DJ from set 3 combo, the smuggle options, or set 2, definitely started to become more and more of a problem as time went on, mainly because people got sick of it. The combo technically existed back in set 2, but the ability to take resources from your opponent was just obnoxious. And set 3 did give it a couple tools like Plo Koon, and then set 4 gave it even some more, and it just became obnoxious for people to play against. So I feel bad with Jump to Lightspeed. I feel like of all the sets on the list, ranking them 1 to 5, Jump to Lightspeed got snuffed the most. But if you look at the most played cards today, the most played cards for Jump to Lightspeed are not high up on the list. Like I said, Blue Leader is one of them. Rebellious Hammerhead is one of them. No Glory is by far the strongest of them all, in my opinion. Red 5 is up there. But even that, like, you're comparing that to Shadows of the Galaxy. And if you look at power levels of the set, just that, you're comparing, like, okay, Red 5 to Fell the Dragon and Crate Dragon and Cassian and Poe Dameron, compared to, you know, I guess at Red 5, No Glory. Like, it's not close, to be honest. It's just not. There are just so many amazing options. Timely Intervention from Shadows of the Galaxy. Shadows of the Galaxy has definitely gone up on the power level scale as time has went on. But I feel bad with Jump to Lightspeed. I think it's the most snuffed on this list just because of how each of the sets have shaped up. I think what's interesting is, as of right now, by the way, the like I said, the limited format for Jump to Lightspeed was by far the worst. But as of right now, the hindsight has definitely looked favorably upon Shadows of the Galaxy, and so it has risen up out of the ashes, whereas Twilight Republic still remains at the bottom. But I think Shadows of the Galaxy for me is just a little bit more powerful. The mechanics are a little bit more engaging. Piloting didn't really do a whole lot, and that's what pushes it further down for me. Like, piloting, yes, there are some situations where pilots do happen, like Vader, for example. Vader Yellow is one of the decks that really is Jump to Lightspeed oriented and really space oriented, but that doesn't compare against the mass amount of usage of Smuggle and the power level of the cards from set 2. So I think it's going to end up on number 4 for me. And now we come to the final set, the most recent one, and it's going to fit in the last spot at number 2. This is the one set, Legends of the Force, that people argue that is better than Spark of Rebellion. And it is an incredible, incredible set. It is not only powerful, but also incredibly fun. The new mechanic with the Force and the focus on Force powers has been just a really interesting one to play around. Constantly being able to keep up with it and keep your opponent off the Force, or keeping yourself with the Force and playing around getting the Force and then using your cards to pay yourself off. It's actually kind of a very engaging mini game within the game, and it is one of the better mechanics. I don't think it's quite as good, honestly, as Smuggle. To be honest, I think Smuggle is probably my favorite mechanic in the whole game, but it is a fun one. It is up there. Probably my second favorite mechanic, which is the Force. But in terms of just overall playstyle and impact that this set has had on the meta, oh my gosh. The only thing that is saving Legends of the Force from being completely dominant is how strong some of the cards from Spark of Rebellion were. Things like Power of the Darkside and Force Throw are still some of the most played cards in the entire game. They are good cards. But now you have things like Anakin Skywalker, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Chirrut, Secretive Sage, Yaddle, Mace Windu, Errant Warrior, Grogu, Adi Gallia, Ezra, Ogbogdo, Darth Vader. Like, there are so many cards from Legends of the Force that are not only powerful, even at a common level, because they enable the Force for all your other cards to be incredibly powerful, but also just incredibly played. Like, they impacted the meta an incredible amount. I mean, if you just look at the finalist match of the Galactic Championship, it was a Kylo from set 5 versus a Talzin from set 5. So yeah, not only are the leaders viable, the mechanics are engaging, the cards are extremely powerful, and overall the set was done extremely well. I think this is as good as you're going to get in comparison to Spark of Rebellion. I don't know, maybe there's a nostalgia bias for me. I'm sure there is, but for me, Spark of Rebellion, the reason why it's so good is because it was able to do all this, do an amazing job, and be powerful without actually knowing a lot about what the cards are going to be doing in the future, and at the same time, what the metas are going to be like and how the game is going to evolve. It did all this and remained relevant as the first original set. And I think that's really, really a testament to how powerful those cards are and how universal they are. Now, Legends of the Force was definitely more focused in on the Force side of things, which means, and this is the thing that I think is the biggest con with Legends of the Force, a lot of decks just didn't get anything. Take, for example, Vader Yellow. It just didn't really get a whole lot from Legends of the Force. There's a lot of decks like that where they're more space focused, or they're not actually using the Force. And if you're not using the Force, you're really not getting any new cards from Legend of the Force, because that's where the strength therein lies, is those Force payoff cards. And so I think that's the biggest con that you could say for Legends of the Force. And not every set is, obligated to give every deck something, but I just would consider that the biggest con Legends of the Force, and that's something as a testament to how amazing Legends of the Force actually is. The set is fantastic. It's really fun. The cards are very powerful. We're seeing it very frequently. The leaders are actually engaging, like their unique abilities, like Kylo discarding cards from his hand to draw cards, and Talzin, having the Force to give them -1/-1. Very, very engaging abilities that definitely make it a little bit more exciting for people to be playing the game at the current moment. And I think you could definitely argue that it's number one. I wouldn't be completely bashing anyone that would say that. I would also say that if you were going to argue that Jump to Lightspeed's number 3 and Shadows of the Galaxy is number 4, I could see that as well. I think this kind of middle section, I could even see that if someone's arguing Shadows of the Galaxy is number 2 and Legends of the Force is number 3, I think I could see that as well. Honestly, there are a lot of, really, really interesting opinions about each of these set that I think people have introduced. But overall, Legends of the Force has been absolutely amazing, and it's by far one of my favorite sets so far. I mean, it's number 2 on the list, guys. It is really, really awesome to see such a massive impact on the competitive format from a single set. I think that's the biggest, most exciting thing. That could also be a downside in the future. I may look back on this and be like, man, we had such a long meta with Force Throw and Ki-Adi-Mundi and Chirrut and, Grogu's or whatever it is. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of seeing Time Intervention Darth Vader, right? But that's for the future to determine. And I'm sure that when we rate these sets or rate these sets in the future, we'll have more sets to combat these against, and we'll have a bigger, more robust list. I do think that with rotation coming up soon, that a lot of these are not going to have too much time to prove themselves, and I think Spark Rebellion is still going to be one of the best sets in the entire game. We'll see how long those cards end up being some of the most powerful cards as the Eternal format is going to be introduced, and that'll give us, a little bit more insight into, how much the game is going to be power corrupted over the course of time. But overall, I think it's something that's really awesome to say. There's not a single set on here that I feel like was horrible. I do think some of these sets really failed in their mechanics. I do think Coordinate and Exploit just didn't really work out for Twilight Republic. I think Piloting, honestly, is one of the weaker mechanics in the game too. But overall, the sets themselves in their entirety, there's not a failure on this list. Maybe not meeting expectations for sure. And if you consider that a failure, then yes. The closest one to me is Twilight Republic. But all the other 4, I was happy with. And I wasn't even one that was really unhappy with Shadows of the Galaxy when it came out. In fact, when Shadows of the Galaxy came out, it was really fun for me at the time. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with Draft. It was probably my second favorite Draft format. Legends of the Force being my third favorite. Jump to Lightspeed, then Twilight Republic, then Jump to Lightspeed. Jump to Lightspeed is actually my least favorite. I did not like the piloting mechanic in Draft. It was just not fun. But overall, I mean, I think every set has been pretty good, and that's awesome to say. But I'm really curious to see your all lists in the comment section down below. I think there are so many different arguments you can make. I just don't think the only argument I don't think you could make is that Spark Rebellion is below 2. That's the only one I don't think you make. That's my sticking point. If anyone has Spark Rebellion below 2, I just can't trust you, okay? And if you can't trust me because I've got Jump to Lightspeed in number 4, or I've got Legend of the Force, or Shadows of the Galaxy number 3, fair enough. That's your sticking point. But I do think Spark Rebellion has just been an absolute amazing introduction to Star Wars Unlimited. And I wish a lot of us could go back and revisit and play through the meta and play through the limited format that set introduced. It was absolutely amazing. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. I wonder if in the future we will see a remaster of some of the older sets. I think that would be really cool. Like a combination of, you know, a group of the sets introduced as a set in of itself. I think that would be kind of fun. Not in terms of like Premier Legal, but like as a draftable format. I don't know. The game is so new that who knows what could happen in the future. But I think there's so much potential for this game. I'm really excited. And we have 3 new sets that were just spoiled, right? Who knows what those are going to bring. One other important factor that I did not mention, but Legends of the Force also introduced Legends cards. And I think that was a huge turning point for the future of the game. And if you make that argument that that's number 1, I could see that. Okay. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.